Yeah.
All right. Let's jump right in. I started recording it. So, all right. Well, welcome to Raise the Bar. This is the Jump Camps podcast, Sky High and Fly Jump Camps podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haynes, and I'm with a young lady from England. She is 8 hours ahead of us and very graciously giving her time to us. This is Rosie Sharples. Did I get that right? Sharples?
Yep, that's right. Yeah. Sharples, yeah.
And I was looking back on our chat, and I think I started texting back and forth with you about 2 years ago. So the first thing I remember was asking you if I could post some of your videos because I was impressed, and you were gracious about that. And then when I got your background info, you were only 16 at the time. And I know there's been a lot of changes, but you've continued to improve over those times. And then why don't you tell everybody about your recent experiences and where you ended up going to school? Because I know you're going to be starting college in the fall, right?
Yeah. So obviously over the last few years a lot has happened. There's been COVID. I've been finishing high school. I'm in Scotland. I live between Edinburgh and Glasgow, so I go to a school in somewhere called Falkirk. I've been sitting my exams, so we do national fives and hires over here. I've done well in those. And I've managed to get a place at a college in America, Mississippi State University. For the longest time, my biggest goal was to get a scholarship in America, so I could continue my academic and athletic careers. And so, do you want me to tell you a bit about how that process, or?
Interesting. Everybody's into Mississippi State is big over here because it's an SEC school. So, and the SEC, the Southeastern Athletic Conference, is huge in football because it seems like almost every year the national champion comes from that area. It's either Alabama or somebody has to beat Alabama, or it's Alabama. And this last year it was Georgia, and those are SEC schools. So, and track and field over here, the SEC conference is very strong, LSU, Arkansas, right? So, and most of the other schools, even if they're not super well known in the SEC, are trying like heck to become well known. I don't know much about Mississippi State's, track program, but I know it's going to try to be as competitive as they can. Nobody likes getting walked over by the powerhouses. So we know you're going there. It's awesome that they recruited you. And then what are you going to be doing? Your major, and you're not just a high jumper, right? You're a heptathlete.
Yeah. So I am primarily training the heptathlon, but my best event is the high jump. It's definitely my favorite event. Always has been. Yeah.
So what are you going to be majoring in? Have you picked one yet, or you just?
Sorry. So I'm going to be majoring in social work. Originally, I was looking to study in criminology, but it's definitely not transferable back to the UK because the systems are so different. Okay. So social work is a close second for me. It's something that I'm very interested in, kind of always have been.
So you're going to put your time in over here and then go back home. You're not going to transplant over here?
I don't know. We'll have to see how the next 4 years go. If I enjoy it, there's every opportunity to potentially stay there. If training's going well, I do well in my degree. Have to wait and see. It'd be a nice option.
What was the weather a big shock for you there when you went to visit Mississippi State?
For the time of year, yeah, definitely. So in March, I think we went over there. It was between 22 and 26 degrees. I don't know what that is in.
Yeah, fair. I know it's got to be in the 80s. It's got to be 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, it was pretty warm. You could feel that it was that kind of clammy warm a few of the days. On the last day, it was a bit colder and it rained, but I know that I'm going to get over there next month and it's going to be 35, 40 degrees.
It'll be roasting. Yeah. One of the hottest places I've been, my senior year at UCLA, we went to SMU for an invitational. So that Southern Methodist University is in Texas. So Texas is one of the biggest states in the union, and it's one of the farthest south. And it's just hot and humid, man. It was like we were in Fort Worth and it was 85 and it felt like 105 with that humidity. It was so warm. I've told the story before, but I remember you know how you have your warm-up sequences all set up, right? So I would jog 2 laps and I would do my running drills, my mobilities, and I would, do some stretches and everything. And I literally jogged a half a lap. And I was in shape. It wasn't like I couldn't breathe, but I was like, after a half a lap, I was sweating so profusely and just, I got done with a half lap and I go, that's it. I didn't finish 2 laps. I didn't even finish 1 lap. I jogged back to my spot and I did my drills rather half speed. I like really shut down my warm up and I had a great meet. I was warm and loose, but I didn't spend any time like I usually would warming up. And, California is warm, but it's not that humid. So it was kind of like warming up in
Yeah.
the sauna, it was like warming up in the
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's definitely like one of my worries when I get over there, that the heat is going to be like a bit of a shock to me. We've recently had a bit of a spell here in the UK where it was like 40 degrees. It was in London somewhere. It was about 35, 36 where I
right.
live. And that is the
Wow.
warmest I think I've ever experienced. And
That's
that wasn't
way up
humid
there.
heat either. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a
36,
phenomenon.
36
Yeah.
degrees centigrade. I'm gonna look that up while you talk about something else, but I'm just curious. So let's back up, Rosie. You started your athletic career over there in Scotland. Did you do anything other than track and field? What was your first experiences in athletics?
So when I was really, really young, I did dancing, and my mum was a professional dancer. So naturally, she wanted me to kind of do that. And for a long time, I did like ballet, I did acrobatics, tap, etc. And I did the brownies. I did a lot of different things. But me and my brother, we also did run, jump, and throw, which is
Okay.
basically like, kids, like you play games and stuff like at the
Right.
track. Um, so that was kind of like my first experience when I was really young. I want to say like 7, like very, very young. And then for a while we kind of stopped, but went back to dancing. And then I started going back to run, jump, and throw with a friend. And then since then I've just never stopped. And I've progressed through like my club in Falkirk, and I just continued on.
Okay.
So
So I know schooling and everything's different over there. Like the way that we're set up here, we start school in kindergarten, so at like 5 years old, and we go through what's called elementary school is up to 6th grade. So we go, kindergarten and then 6 years. So that's 7 years. Once you get to be 12 or 13-ish, that's when you start junior high school over here. We go from 7, 8, 9. Some schools just go 7 and 8. And then some break it up, they go 6, 7, 8, junior high, and whatever. So elementary, junior high, you can be done anywhere between 8 and 9. So some high schools are 3 or 4 years over here. So then you get to that. Once you're 18, then it's college and all that. So when you're saying when you're in the local run, jump, and throw, what was that? Was that kind of like a long jump or a high jump, or did they do both?
yeah, so like run, jump, and throw is kind of just like the name of it. We you do loads of different things because everyone's really young when you're there. So you do like you'll do tag, or you'll do like just all these games that you wear the bibs and stuff for, like the
Mhm.
different colored bibs. You don't really necessarily do like high jump, long jump. You do a bit of the throwing of the javelin and stuff, but it's mainly just for fun.
Right.
And it's just a way to progress. Then once you start to get a bit older, I think it's like about 9 or 10, because you start to compete. You can compete when you're an under 11. You can then move on to the actual like club, and you'll start to do proper running and try these different events.
Right.
When you're run, jump, and throw, it's mainly just about having fun and just seeing the different, like you see the high jump, you don't necessarily actually do the high jump, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right. Yeah.
um,
I'm
yeah.
curious though. It sounds like fun. So the other thing that I've noticed, doing all this communicating through the Sky High and Fly jump caps on Instagram is, um, everybody. It seems like there's all these under. I see that the under 14, under 16, under 18, right? So everybody's got that system set up over there, and it seems to go all the way around. Like yourself, I've followed you. I followed some of the Russian girls, the Polish girls. Whatever, doesn't matter what country. It seems like that system's pretty well established over there. So, when did you start getting to be where all of a sudden you're just like you actually started high jumping over a bar and realized that you were pretty good at that?
Yeah. So when I think it was like an under 13, so I think it was about 12-ish. the coach, when I finally managed to get into the club, the coach I had, he was called Willie Day. He's still there now. He's like an older guy, and he kind of like did a multi events group. He introduced me to the high jump, the long jump, and I remember attempting 140 and clearing it, and I was thinking, wow, I was like, this is great. I was like, it was like such an achievement for me,
Right.
to clear that low height. And I think of all the events, I really enjoyed it the most. And I can just really say from there, I just progressed, and my progress has never been, 10 centimeters, 15 centimeters. It's always been very gradual progress.
Mhm.
Generally it was just 140, 45, 50, 55.
Right.
I think when I got to about under 17, I moved coach, because he was a high jump specialist, the coach that I have now. And I think he's the one who generally I have to give all my thanks to, because he's taught me so much about high jump, the technical aspects of it, and I really understand those technical aspects of it. I can
Mhm.
feel when I do something right in the high jump and something that's not quite
Right.
right.
What do you guys do? You're kind of nudging into my area here, Rosie, because I am the guy who wants to know what everybody's doing in their training. Okay. I was a jumper in high school and college. I went to UCLA. I competed at a relatively high level. I got to jump against some really good jumpers. I mean, I only jumped 222. And when I say only, I know there's jumpers out there that go, wow, that's really high. And then once you're around on the world scene, it's like, no, 7.3 is really nothing. It's like for the guys, you got to be jumping 7.5 or 6. And even that now is really not that great. Like if you jump 7.5 or 6 at one of the world championships, something like that, you're probably not even going to place. In the Olympics last summer, I believe, that you had to be, I think Javon Harrison jumped 7.8 and came in 7th or 9th or something. It was crazy. So, knowing all that, once my career was over, I never even made it to an Olympic trials, let alone to the Olympics. So once my career was over and I was trying to become a better coach, and realizing that my coaching had been good, but there were holes, and I'm always looking and watching. So when I see somebody putting something on their training on Instagram, my eyes are open, right? I'm watching. Is it a drill? What are they doing? If I can break it down on video, I will. I've got a little analyzer where I can go frame by frame. And so and there's a lot of things that I know. I've gone to clinics, all these other things. So when I'm watching someone like yourself and you're going, I've got this one coach, I switched to another coach, and I'm thinking, okay, you did that, and now you're going to go to Mississippi State. So are you going to bring your coach with you, or are you going to switch coaches again?
So I'll be switching coaches again. When I went over for my visit in March, I met all the coaches over there. I think I remember telling my coach, like when I was a bit younger, when I first started training with him, I remember saying to him, like, when I leave school, like, I really want to get like a scholarship. I want to go to the States, train in the sun, good facilities, good, like all these different, not necessarily good coaches, because the coach I had is still good, but and I remember, I don't think he really believed me. I think he was like, oh yeah. And then the older I started to get and it started to kind of like progress more, I was like, no, I'm still wanting to go to the States. So I think kind of once he got a grasp with that, I think he was, understandably a bit upset. But he came over for that visit with me in March, and I think even he was just blown away by the facilities over there, like all the different support systems over there for like rehab and stuff. It's just so different from over here. He was just blown away. I was blown away. So
That's
great.
awesome. And then your high jump, your career best is now 174. Is that right? Is it with 174? Okay, so I know 183 is what over here. You got to forgive us, the Americans. Rosie, were incredibly hard-headed. I am still, I'm 58 years old. So when I was raised early in school, it was still feet and inches, and ounces and cups and all that stuff, right? And so they introduced the metric system to me when I was a teenager, and I get it, but I don't get it. Like my brain doesn't think that way. So it's like, it's just, and I'm one of those people that's like, whatever you put in there first, I'm like a duck, like a little baby duck. When the mama duck shows up, they're like, oh, I'm going to follow her. So it's like whatever language it was, I think I got taught first, and whatever measurement system, those are like it. So I think in feet and inches. So whenever you said 174, my brain's like, okay, what is that? It doesn't mean anything to me. I gotta.
I'm 5'10", so it was kind of usually just about my head height, just above it.
Right.
So I don't know if that helps anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's a good measure. It may sound snooty to some people, but I don't think you're a real high jumper until you start jumping over your own height. So that's,
Yeah.
you know what I
I've
mean?
heard that one before.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
at the high levels, it's obviously true unless somebody's 7'8" and they're only jumping 7'6" or something. But yeah, it's I remember all my heights as I was growing up by the fact that I was usually jumping taller than I was. So it was like, I'm like, okay, when I was 12, what was I jumping then? I was like, well, I was only 5'1". Oh yeah, I remember I jumped about 5. Yeah. So you're jumping 174 in the high jump. And then brag a little bit. What did that do for you? Were you a champion? I can't remember on your posts, your feeds. I remember you've got a lot of wins under there.
Yeah, so I'm an under 20. I'm an under 20 in my age group because I'm 18. The event that I jumped 174 at was the Scottish Senior Championships. So obviously all the girls there were a lot older than me. They were all like 20 and above. And I won that event with that new PB, and it shot me up in the rankings for my age group in the UK. So it was pretty good, really. I'd always kind of wanted to get near to that 175 mark. I'm still that centimetre off, but I'm definitely closer.
Right.
So it also gave me the opportunity to be selected for the under 20 Manchester International, which is like the 4 nations. So England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. And there's also a GB selection. I was just short of making the GB selection because there were some girls who jumped 176, but it was enough to be selected for the Scotland team, which was my first Scottish vests, my first international. Yeah, so nice. It was really great. Unfortunately, this year I'll not be able to compete in that because I'll be away out in the States by then. But I did get the email for the offer, so that's what counts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a bummer. Yeah, making those any kind of a travel squad where you go somewhere. I have a jumper, Barbara Bachaka, who's in Canada, and she just made one of their travel teams to go down to the Bahamas. So I'm like, okay, tell them you got to fly your coach there. Like, I want to go to the Bahamas. I want to see her jump, obviously, but yeah. So you're getting your travel by going to the States. Maybe next year you can do both. Is that the hope there? As you continue to improve your marks, you'll still be making those kinds of teams, and then you can still do that.
Yeah. I mean, that is the hope. I mean, the long-term goal is I want to be selected for that GB vest, whether that be to compete at the GB juniors, which I think I have one more year to do that, or, some sort of under 20 championships. What I've been told is that if I qualify for something like the British champs, I actually get flown back here to compete. Whether that is true or not, that is what the coach told me. So that's pretty good, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet that would be the case. Yeah. So what do you think that was going to take? 175, 176, somewhere in there? Like you said, those other girls that beat you jumped a couple centimeters higher, and then now you're talking GB. I'm assuming is all of Great Britain. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yes, yeah. The British champs is like, they'll do, that's kind of like the trials and stuff. So if there's a big event, championships, that's kind of like the trial event essentially. It's not nearly as competitive as the US. When you watch the US trials, there's like, wow. But over here, they do take younger jumpers. So under 20s, people like myself, if you're jumping between that 75, 80 kind of range, they will take you, or you'll get an invite essentially to compete. And it's broadcast usually on the BBC, which is like our big tele program over here.
Right.
So it's really the hope, that would be a really great opportunity for me, and it's something that I've always wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of nudging into another area. So I kind of got sidetracked really quickly off of the trainings aspect. I may have to come back to that, but we nudged into this. We talked on another podcast with my mentor and coach, Alan Hankel, and we were discussing with Lauren Magnuson, who's an American jumper who qualified for the trials in 2016, and then I can't remember I don't think she competed. She might've got injured or something happened, but we were talking about the state of track and field, both in the United States and around the world. And, you know, in the United States, track and field is a way lower echelon sport when you compare it to American football, soccer, basketball, almost anything. It's like we are way down the totem pole as far as, you know, fan interest, money, TV revenue, all that kind of stuff. And what I had heard all the time, you know, when I was in my 20s, I was about, you know, your age in high school going into college, everybody started talking about Europe. You know, you go over to Europe and it's crazy. You know, the stands are full and they are just about track, you know, and we're always thinking, we've never seen that. You know, I never saw that until the 84 Olympics were over here in Los Angeles. Like we're going to get the 2028 games also, but there's 2028. Yeah. So we're, you know, when I went to the Coliseum, you can fit 100,000 people in the Los Angeles Coliseum, and it was packed. But that was the Olympics, you know. So if it's not the Olympics and it's not a big meet over here, it's kind of like family and friends in the stands, you know, like kind of empty. Yeah. So the long rambling question from me is what is the state of track and field, both in Scotland and then and the bigger places that you've been in Europe and that and the stuff you've seen on TV? What is it? How's it doing? I've heard it's not as strong as it was.
Unfortunately, I think that is true. I think in Scotland, particularly, just from my experience, you know, there's been good and bad experiences. I think the main issue is lack of funding in the system for us. You know, underfunding leads to lack of coaches. There's not that many coaches in Scotland, particularly when it comes to field events. I really enjoyed watching the World Championships, but I think something that was evident after watching that is that we obviously excel in distance. You know, it was great watching like Laura Muir, like everyone's a huge fan of her here. But, you know, we hardly have anybody in the field events. It's just the money isn't put into the system. And right. I think Scottish athletics, they do their best to give as much opportunities to younger athletes as possible, but the money just isn't there to do it. I think when you go to England, there is more opportunities, there is more money put into the system. There's obviously a bigger pool of athletes, so they do produce just more athletes in general. But I think the main thing comes from lack of funding. And it's quite funny because we look over to the US, and particularly after going for that visit in March, we see the kind of opposite, obviously, to what you see. We see a system that seems to be very like funded. You know, track and field is a huge thing over there. It seems to me, compared to what it is over here.
Right.
I was actually reading today, though, obviously it was the 10-year anniversary, I think, was it with the London 2012? Was it 10-year anniversary today, I think?
Yeah.
And I remember when I was younger, I remember that being on TV, and, you know, the stadium was absolutely packed. And I think when it comes to events like that, the stadiums are packed. People enjoy watching the athletics. So I suppose that's a good sign. But I think unless you get to British athletics, you know, the two systems underneath that, which younger athletes are in, it is just so underfunded, lack of coaches. You know, the distance running is the priority, and it's a real shame, you know.
Interesting. Okay. So let's get back to you and your the high jumping we've talked about now. How did you get started then doing the heptathlon? If you started out really liking the high jump, is it the way that I know that it works over here? Usually, like if someone's fast, then you know what happens to a sprinter? They're going to end up running the 100 to 200. Sometimes I might get stretched to the 400 just because especially if they've got a really good coach, I think that makes them train the 400, even though they're like, I'm only a 100-meter runner. So you got 1, 2, 4, and a couple relays, right? So if I've got one sprinter, I can stretch them to 5 events. And the more I've been watching track and field the last few years, it becomes evident to me that speed kills. So if I've got someone who's fast, I can make them a long jumper, I can make them a pole vaulter, and I can maybe even teach them how to throw a javelin. You know, everything involves that straight line speed. You know, you curve a little bit right at the end of the high jump, but speed doesn't hurt there either. So it's like all of a sudden I got hurdles, I got sprint, as I go down the list, I need to either learn how to throw a jab, a shot, and a disc for the guys. And for the gals like yourself, you know, javelin and shot, you know, you don't have to throw the disc, right? There's only 7 of them. No disc, yeah, which is too bad because I love watching the world champion, the gal that throws the disc right now. I always pictured somebody really big, and she's like, you know, she's not.
Yeah.
she's not big, she's fast, you know, and an example, again, she gets you the ring quick. So how did you graduate from that? Was it one of those situations like, hey, Rosie, you're pretty good high jumping, why don't we try this and see if you're good at that too?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually kind of the opposite from that. Like in the club that I'm at, you're really pushed into distance running. If you can run, that's brilliant. Most people run. I was just lucky at the time that one of the coaches who was there, that I think one training session, he was like, you know, does anybody want to come along with me and to do some hurdles? And I was like, yeah, that's great. So a group of us went and did that. And I ended up continue training with him. And obviously, like I said, he was the only kind of person who did all the other events. So gradually, he just started adding in all the other events. Before him, I didn't even know what the heptathlon was. He kind of just said, you know, that you can do this combined events. You know, the Emirates in Glasgow, it's the big Chris Hoy velodrome.
Yeah.
The Indo-Europeans was held there. The event was held there, and I remember I came, I think it was second I came. And it was a really whirlwind of a day. Like I didn't even know there was an 800 at the end of it. Like
Wow.
that was a shock.
Awesome. So you started doing that over there. What when your first heptathlon was, how old were you? And then was that pretty much your MO after that? Because I know in a regular track meet, like over here, there's dual meets where we go against another school or another, maybe a couple schools, but they're smaller meets. And I'm kind of losing you for a second there. Might be having technical difficulties. How are we doing? Rosie's picture froze. We're skipping. All right, we're gonna wait for just a sec. Oh, there you are.
Yep.
So
yeah, your picture as well.
that was weird. Yeah. What was my question was, how long and have you been doing it? And was Mississippi State, well, let's finish the first. How long have you been doing the hep then? Since you said 14?
So well, I started athletics when I was about 12, 13, and then you only start doing the heptathlon when you're an under 17. So I've only been doing the heptathlon for a few years, but I've been doing the pentathlon since about under 15s, potentially, yeah, about 14, I'd say 14.
So the pentathlon is, that's because I know what it is over here. Over here we do high jump, long jump. I think they might throw the shot. They run the hurdles and like a sprint or something. What is that? What is the pentathlon?
Yeah, so I think similar to you guys, it's the hurdles, high jump, long jump, shot put, 800s.
800 at the end,
So
yeah.
5 events one day, and then obviously it moves to 2 days when you get like older.
Right. What's your least favorite of those 5?
Oh, I think it used to be the 800. I used to really struggle with that event, but now it's definitely the shot put. It's an event that I've struggled with. I've never had specific training necessarily for it, so I really struggle with it. Strength is something that is a big area that I can work on.
Okay, that was kind of nudging into another area too. I was going to talk about your upcoming training. So your the heptathlon, you went from the pentathlon to the hep. It's only been a couple of years. Was that where Mississippi State was the most interested? Were they seeing huge potential in the hep? Are they seeing you more as a high jumper who can also do the hep, or what was the thinking?
Yeah, so I'd spoke to a few different schools, but Mississippi stood out to me. And the coach who recruited me, he was looking at me as a heptathlete. He kind of looked at my times. I think he looked, you know, kind of at my physique, you know, my height, and he could see that I had a lot of progress that I could make in certainly a lot of different areas. He was familiar with the system over here, so he kind of understood that, you know, the lack of coaching. You know, like I say, I have one coach, but he's specialized in the high jump. He's kind of like, he's learning at the same time as me, with the whole like heptathlon thing. So all the other events weren't specialized. So with the progress I'd made just with those events, you know, I think he could really see how much more I had to give.
Awesome. So now we're nudging into the area you've identified strength, and I'm assuming upper body strength. But overall, what are you looking forward to getting as you head over to the fall and you guys start? I can give you a little bit of a heads up. From high school to college, I went to a high school in Long Beach, California, and I went to UCLA as a freshman. And when we started working out, I had never worked out that hard. It was like a squared. It was like whatever was your hardest workout was squared. So we started training, and I don't remember seeing a high jump bar for a while. You know, we were going in the weight room, we were doing on cross country runs, we were doing all kinds of stuff. And I was just, when I would go back to the dorm rooms, I would just be like, oh, you know, falling down, get some food in there, you know, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, everybody else like, aren't you gonna be studying? I'm like, no, I'm looking at the insides of my eyelids and my head's on the pillow, man. I'm out, because it would just kill you physically. So what are you looking forward to when you get there first?
I'm definitely just looking forward to having a nice group of people to train with, people who are definitely interested in the same things as me, wanting to get better at my athletics, being quite competitive. Over here, I basically just train on my own most of the time, or just with one other person. So having a group to push me forward is something that I'm really looking forward to. Just even having a new training set up. I think, like you were saying, you know, I'm not going to be used to this kind of training. There's definitely going to be drills, things I've never done before. I'm going to be out of my comfort zone, and in my eyes, that can only make me like a better athlete. Yeah.
Awesome. So now we're going to get back to down to the brass tacks. So I apologize, because there's just so many jumpers to follow. So I can't claim to be super aware of the little things. But with your high jumping, are you a single arm takeoff or double arm takeoff?
Right now, I am a single, so I kind of come into the bar and I lean in with my arm. But recently, over the last year, I have been working with my coach, and he does see more of an opportunity to kind of have that arm punch like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I want to do it, but my body doesn't fully do it. My coach doesn't encourage trying to purposely make my arms do that. If they don't do that, he's not a believer in trying to make somebody do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of like an in-betweenie. I do kind of single and double. It's really kind of something that we've been working on.
Right. Okay, that's of interest to me, because when I demonstrate to new kids, I'll show them, you know, when you're coming into the bar, the original, I got to do it from the other side. If I could show it originally, because Fosbury came from the left, I come from the right, but he would basically do a long jump, high jump takeoff, because he never did the lead arm and he never did two arms. He would get to, you know, here and reverse. And I've found that 1 out of every 200 kids will do that naturally. It's unnatural in a lot of ways for lift. Kids that play basketball and volleyball will learn a lot of times because they're jumping up to grab a ball or to block a volleyball or whatever, or to go to hit a volleyball. Like, for whatever reason, some people naturally will use two, you know, and I think in basketball that tends to be the case. And then a lot of times people learn how to jump off either 2 feet or 1 foot based on that. So, you know, it's a real crapshoot sometimes when you go running in. And I was a double armor. I never could do anything else. And just recently, I've been fascinated by watching the single armors, because they operate at really high levels. I liked watching Bondarenko from the Soviet Union. I like watching Derek Drown, who interestingly enough would gather like he was going to do a double, and then he would come through in single, you know. So I'm like, okay, what, you're messing with me now. But the beautiful thing to me at the high jump is that, like you said, everybody's different. Like when I start saying, okay, this guy's this and this guy's that, you know, I go, some people drive that knee up and just leave it up and sail over. And some people drive that knee up and then they punch their hip up, you know, and I call those hip punch or the hip pop, or people that are doing layouts. Some people have their heads really far back. Some people got their chin on their chest. You know, it's like when I break it down, I just go, look, pick something that you like and let's see if we can make it work. Because I've kind of lost track of, this is going to sound funny, but like one of the things I was telling one of my kids one time, I go, you can't scrape your takeoff foot on the ground, right? If you're scraping that foot on the ground as you're driving your knee up, it's slowing you down too much. You never be able to jump that high. So I don't think anybody could jump any higher than like maybe 7, 2, or 3 and be a foot dragger. And then lo and behold, I was at the Mount SAC meet this year, Mount San Antonio College, big meet on this, you know, West Coast. And I watched this kid who had graduated from Texas Tech. He jumped 7.5 and he must have had a huge hole in his toe from scraping his foot, because he scraped his foot more than I've ever seen anybody do it. So I was just like, and every time I make these proclamations, it's like I can just see God up there just shaking his head going, okay, watch this, you know, and here's somebody else that breaks your stereotypes, you know. So it's like, when I look, like, I can't say to my kids, I go, this is the Troy Haynes Sky High and Fly Jump Camps system. This is the way we do it here, because everybody's different. Singles, double, you know, reverse, like you're saying, you're kind of a half, you know, right in the middle. And then, you know, I'm like, okay, so you get in these arguments with people, you know, what's more effective, speed or power? And I'm like, well, power is really force times velocity. So power and force and velocity are all related, you know, so it's like you're on a different spectrum, you know. So it's like, anyway, it's fascinating to me. So when you're looking at your technique changes, what are the things that you think that you do really well? That's badly worded. Let's just go, what are the things that you do really well when you're jumping?
So I have a pretty good knee drive. If I can get it right, I have good knee drive, and I have really good, like, kind of like elevation off the ground. I'm not extremely springy, but I do have a good amount of natural spring, like, if that makes sense. I have a good knee drive. Something that I've been working on a lot though is, like I was saying, that kind of like arm, because I kind of go to do this double, but I'm kind of more of a single. Sometimes I can lean into the bar, and I know everyone has the issue. It's the forces. You're gonna go right into the bar just because that's
Right.
you know, the force. But we do a lot of run rounds where we try and, like, obviously lean from the feet, so you're leaning as you run around the curve. And so we've been trying to kind of like hold that lean as long as we can when we're going over the bar. But like I say, I have really good knee drive, so really good hip height over the bar, and I'm pretty good at arching my back. I coil myself around the bar. But I've discussed it with my coach quite a lot. You know, when you coil around the bar and you have a big arch, it can also be an issue, because everything has to be, as you'll know, it has to be in perfect timing, because you're coiled right around the bar. So if one little thing, or, you know, 1 millimeter you're out, you like hit that bar some way, somehow. So
That's interesting, because I've had a lot of experience these last few years with, I've gotten two or three different athletes, maybe four, you know, jumping about 209, 210 in high school, guys that were really bendy for guys, you know, because I was not Mr. Flexible. I was more power. I could jump, but I didn't have a pretty layout. I was efficient, but you would never be like, oh my God, look at that guy, he's so bendy. That wasn't me. So when I see someone who's like that, it's interesting, because sometimes they become what I call layout specialists. Like, at low bars and everything else, they can pop off the ground, and then they punch that hip, throw the head back, and they get in that great position. You're like, wow, that's awesome. And then I'll tell them, I'll go, hey, when the bar keeps going up, you're going to have to wait, because I find that people that are really flexible and really into their layout, it's like their signature move, right? So, you know, what I'm preaching to my jumpers is, look, straight, curve, takeoff mechanics, right? Arm drive, knee drive, flight. And my experience, the only part of all of these 5 parts, so straight, curve, takeoff, flight. And I always say it like that because it gets longer. Flight, longer and longer. Layout, still the same. The amount of time that you're over the bar should be the same. You know, once you get all the way up there, then you lay out. So I go, look, the only part of all of those that gets longer is flight. All the other ones, as you get more aggressive with your speed and everything else, they can technically either stay the same, because if you're running from farther, it might be the same amount of time, but you're moving quicker. But I'm like, flight, you know, our escaping the Earth's gravitational pull is, it's not going to change that much, but the more speed you put into it, the longer your flight gets. And I go, you're going to have to learn how to wait to get your move, right? Because if you're super bendy and I go, what is the natural order of those things? Straight, curve, takeoff, flight, layout is last. I'm like, it's last on the list. And if you put it in the middle, because you're, like you said, that lead arm is taking you to the bar too quick, or you're throwing your head back, you're dropping your knee too early, I'm like, you are engaging in step 5 in the middle of step 3, and it's not going to work. Now, it might work at a lower height, but it won't work at your peak height. So
Yeah.
it sounds like that's what you're saying. And in essence is that as good as your layout is, it really depends on when you decide to use it, right? And how long you're going to hold it, right? So I always talk this, if you can see this from here, like you see that U shape, right? That perfect layout. Lots of times people are in what I call the C, which is like this, because as they're going up, they've already driven that knee down, the head's already going back. And I'm like, this is way too early, because you have to wait, right? Now your hips are finally over the bar. And by the time you've waited that long, you're like, I got to be done by now. Drop your hips and you're right on top of the bar when you do it. And it's like, oh no. So I'm like, try to wait, until it's who's the guy that I love watching? Barshim. If you watch Barshim, because he's a mile out, right? He's like, he looks like he's 2 meters away from the bar. So he hits vertical, he goes up, and then he'll rotate around and get to where he's almost horizontal. And that's where we do a lot of our layout drills. I have my athletes laying in the pits, and I'll go, okay, now pop your hips up, because I want them to learn how to go up and then actually come over, and the bar's still down here, and then they lay out, right? And that takes a lot of patience, and you got to wait until you're in the right spot. And lots of times you're talking about these great layouts, I see, basically in the wrong spot, being too close, and that forces a lot of this stuff on people, I've found too. I've been dying in this discussion for a while. You can tell I'm like orating, but so your layout is good. Your knee drive is good. What do you think is going to improve as you're over here in the US? The strength you were talking about, when you guys lift, what kind of lifting are you doing? Are you doing, squats and lunges? You tell us, what is the typical Rosie workout like?
Yeah, I mean, so I've only kind of really started properly going into the gym over just like the last year. My coach wasn't a huge believer in going into the gym at a young age, which is, it's the right thing. Only just the last years I've turned 18. But we do squats, cleans, hand cleans. I've recently, just in the last few months, learned how to snatch. I don't claim to be amazing at it, but just with the bar and getting the movement. Definitely been just working on my flexibility. So I can squat. I mean, I've always been able to squat right down, but it's something that I've had to work on, just my hips, making sure I can get right down. We have worked a bit on upper body, but I'm fairly new to the gym, to be real. Definitely an area that I can progress on. And I think, once I get over to the States, I'm going to have a program, and there's going to be people in the gym who are constantly helping me. Here, obviously, not somebody can't be with me 24/7 in the gym, saying that technique's wrong, that's looking good, but I definitely think when it comes to doing these snatches and stuff, like, it'll be helpful to have people over there who are trained in that area.
Well, there's a lot of different lifts. Squats from a power standpoint are easier for someone to just pick them up and do them, but it's also real easy to get hurt, right? So you want to teach good technique and all that. So the snatch for me was one of the most difficult. It's difficult for me to do power cleans. I like hang cleans. I was better at hang cleans than power cleans. And then a lot of the lifts that you're mentioning, I've seen this interesting trend. So I want to make sure we keep talking, Rosie, because you're going to be like my eyes. And I'm like, are you guys familiar with the Wizard of Oz over there? That story.
Yeah.
So in the Wizard of Oz, the wizard, I am the great and powerful Oz. And, there's a scene where Dorothy looks behind the curtain, and it's this little old man, and he's got all these wheels and gizmos, and it's making him look bigger and, everything else. And she's like, well, you're just this little old guy, what's so special? You're not the great and powerful Oz. I'm that guy that's looking behind the curtain, but in a different way, not because somebody's faking it, but because nobody ever gets to see behind the curtain. So it's like, what is the weight room like in an SEC training room? What is going on there? Because I know with me, what I learned 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I was 18 when I went to UCLA. I'm 58. Okay, 40 years ago. What we learned at 40 years ago was, I was doing squats and cleans and all that stuff. What I've been noticing, if you look on my feed, I follow athletes like yourself, coaches of great athletes, and athletic trainers, and sometimes systems, sometimes some rehab people, because I like seeing anything for joint stability, and a lot of recovery people I follow, because I want to see like the knees over toes guy. I got to follow all these people that are anything that I can do to, I need to get more nutrition people, but anything, and maybe sports psychology, but anything. And that's kind of what this podcast is about. It's like, how do we become better at what we're doing? what I've noticed is a trend from double leg lifting to single leg. There's a lot of step ups, a lot of lunges, a lot of one-legged deadlifts, a lot of one-legged RDL and LDLs, a lot of, and I haven't seen much of it yet, but I'm envisioning some single leg. There are a lot of single leg squats going on. I attribute that to the knees over toes guy and some other innovators, but I haven't seen a lot of single leg deadlift, maybe a little, and I've seen some single leg hang cleans. And I keep thinking, I'm like, the only thing that's wrong with the two-legged squat, in my estimation, is we don't jump off two legs. So the power aspect, that's fine. You can train them both at the same time and blah, blah, blah. But one thing that I was taught was that you want to start your pyramid wide, and your base training is really, really wide, meaning it encompasses a lot of stuff. But as we go through the season, everything tapers, right? We want to get more and more and more and more sport specific. So how does it relate to high jump? How does it relate to whatever? And, some of those lifts will hit all the events, obviously, but it's like, for the explosive arms, I got my athletes holding on to dumbbells and swinging their arms up, or grabbing elastic bands and swinging their arms up. And then I'm like, you get them up here, you got to either drop them or reach. And we start working that, but it's like when you go sports specific, I keep thinking, man, it's got to be that takeoff leg. And then, I want to really train. You come from the right or the left?
At the left.
You come from the left. So your drive knee is your left knee. So like I would be doing a ton of work on that left drive knee hip flexor, right? Get that knee up. And then do your coaches have you try to drive that across also? Like, because some people bring that knee up like this. And I'm a big believer in that, knee coming around and across on that sharp angle.
Yeah, I've never been taught anything like that. No.
Really? Okay. Those are one of the things I've been looking at, because in all of this, when we're talking about double armers, single armers, different types of layouts, blah, blah, blah. I was convinced for years that the single armers, I used to think they're just tall and skinny. And that was the only reason they would do that, because they didn't really need to jump. My opinion was, as I was watching, like, well, they're not even using this arm. This arm doesn't even count. Like, it's not like I'm driving both arms up to go grab the rim or dunk a basketball or whatever. I go, this arm is just nothing. I go, the backside arm is doing all the work, and then the knee drive, right? So I was watching a film of Dietmar Mogenberg. Have you ever heard that name? He won the Olympics in '84. He jumped 7, 8 3/4, which is, I don't know what, like 236, something like that, 237. Which is good jump, but nowadays, like last year, might not even place. But he was 6'8", and I always thought, I'm like, he's barely a high jumper. He's just fast, and he's tall, and he was, oh my gosh, for 6'8", he might have weighed 150 pounds. He was a stick, he was really thin. And so my opinion after watching that, and the camera angles weren't great, and I'm biased. I'm watching Dwight Stone's Good American Jumpers, and we get beat, and here he comes up, and I'm looking, going, oh, this guy, he doesn't even know how to jump. And so like, he jumped 7, 8 3/4, the male ego. But when I found a video shot of him on Instagram, and that knee drive of his had come around. And as you're looking at me, if I'm coming this way, it could be a shot down the bar of me at takeoff. When he hit that knee, and I can't even imitate it. It was like, it was up and across. And I call it cover the hip. Like, if you see somebody drive their knee like this and you can still see this hip, they're probably going into the bar, right? So I'm like, my theory is you got to drive it away from the bar, because the speed of your approach is going to pull you towards the pit. So that's where this really stops some of that swing.
Yeah, right? Straight in, yeah.
That makes sense. So his was like, I can't even show it. I'll have to dig out the picture. One of these days when I have a real podcast, I'm going to have some kind of a video where we can cut to the video and go, look at this. And you'd be like, oh my gosh. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, and that convinced me, like, when I watch anybody, yourself, as a fledgling high jumper getting better and better and better, as I watch the upper echelon, single or double, left side or right, knee drive early, pop, whatever, that knee drive up and across is huge. It's one of those elements that I've seen that I believe goes across the board, is one of the things that's important. So,
well, I've actually, that's the first time I've ever heard that before. So I'm just learning all the time, but I've never actually thought about that before. But I suppose that's a big factor. And like you say, if you can drive that knee across, if you're, you know, if your knee's kind of, you're not going to go straight in as much, it's going to stop you because your knee's pushing almost.
It's going the other direction. Yeah.
So it's not definitely something that I'll keep in mind actually. But you're talking a lot as well about the drills and stuff for the band. You know, we do a lot of this band work. We do like with the boxes and stuff. We do a lot of like resistance work. So the bands are tied around your ankles, and then you have either a weight in your hand or the band around your hand, and you go to kind of do like a step up. And when you get to that point, like top point range where you're like you're in your knee drive phase, you kind of hold it and then you step back down and you do it again.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough when I started training with the coach I have now over here, he had the British high jumper training in the group, and I remember watching him do it and the amount of, you know, like force he generated doing that. That's kind of, you know, when I started to realize the amount of force that is required to do this high jump. But you know, like all these drills and stuff, you know, these knee drives, it's a really big part of our training. Working on that knee drive, it's an important factor, obviously, like you say.
Yeah. Well, it's the box thing. I really want to have. My mentor was talking about doing this, and I've loved the idea. He's like, "What do you think about doing like a symposium on high jumping?" I'm like, "I'm all for it. Let's get us all there and just start breaking stuff down, you know, from arm drive to knee drive to training to whatever." And I've been, like I told you, I've been watching these box drills. If you're going to do boxes, to me, boxes are like a huge area of plyometrics and step ups and everything else. And there's so many variables. The height of the box that you're stepping onto is huge, right? If it's lower, you can get through there quicker. But if you put any significant weight on, and let's say you're stepping onto a 1.5 foot high box, now you got to do a whole different thing. Because if I put my foot up onto this here and then try to step up, my knee is above my hip. That's a bad angle. Right? You have to be really strong to get your own body weight up a box that high. If the box is down here, now I can just, you know, I can step onto it and it can be quick, you know. And so what I found is, like, the higher the box goes, the more work switches from the lead leg to the trail or to the drive knee, because you almost have to push up first before you can step onto the box, right? And I'm like, and that's not a bad thing, because if you think about how you accelerate into the bar, that last step is on your other leg, right? And getting that foot quick and all that other stuff. It was like, I keep thinking I got to train both, you know, with my athletes. Go, look, try to focus on just your takeoff leg here, and let's do that. And then other times be like, hey, let's accelerate in with this foot onto that foot, right? With the arms. So yeah, you can put bands on everything as you're doing it. And it's led to some interesting ideas on how to create resistance. I know the ancient Greece used to do the long jump with weights in their hands and run, take off, and then drop the weights, right? And you think, man, those ancient Greeks, they were pretty smart. It's a great training idea.
Yeah, that's actually something we still do in training. I mean, I don't actually run with weights in my hand, but we do the whole kind of like standing and with the weights like that in our hands, just standing. But also about the boxes, I actually meant to ask, well, when I'm in training, my coach always encouraged, not always depending on what we were working on in training, you know, if we're working on a technical aspect, we'll put the height of the bar down low. But if we're going for a training when we're kind of, you know, wanting to approach the bar like in a competition, he always encouraged kind of having the bar at a higher height. You know, if you want to jump high heights, you need to practice with the high heights. You need to see the heights. Like, it's a mental thing as well. Like, you know, when you're approaching a high bar. And when we're talking about the boxes, if we were to use boxes, we always put the bar to like a high height, you know. So just say the box is like a 12 centimeter box. So you might put the bar to 185, and so you're really only jumping about 173, 74, 74. But mentally, I'm approaching the bar as if I'm going to be jumping 185. You know, when I'm standing back, I'm looking at this bar, and I'm seeing a 185 jump. That's something that was always it's really encouraged when I'm training, is to jump the higher heights. Is that something you encourage, or?
Oh, such a great question, Rosie. I like doing technique work at low heights when you're training for a particular aspect. So we're working on knee drive, knee ride, some kind of arms, whatever it is. I like to not have to worry about actually the explosive leg drive off the ground, because if you've got to do that first and then get to something technical, that's more difficult because you only have so many of those, right? In a particular workout or a meet, let's say, you know, lots of people say you might have 7. I've heard 7 is a number, 8, 10, you know, but most of us would prefer to be able to warm up, take 2 or 3 warm up jumps, open pretty high, get to where I'm jumping close to my best, right? And have 3 jumps at my new best height ever while I'm still fresh, let's say, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a real game. You know, I like to do the technique work low, and then like you're saying, run throughs and pop-ups and that kind of stuff. I like to put the bar high, but especially because if that's something we're doing all the time, like 2 or 3 times a week, if we're doing run throughs, I like to say, hey, let's start looking at what you haven't made yet. So like if it was you, I'd be like, put it at 175, put it at 180. Like you said, do you want to jump 180 this year? I'm sure the answer would be yes. You've jumped 174. So 174 to 177 is about an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter. You know, from 177 to 180 is another inch and a quarter. So that's a 2-inch PR spread out over there. So it's not outside the realm of possibility. You know, and if you said, what are your goals for the season? What is, like, I used to do that every year. I'd do goal setting. So for this season, what would you like to jump by the end of your freshman year at Mississippi State and going to the nationals, and let's say all that stuff? What would that take, and what are you aiming at?
Yeah, I'm definitely aiming for 180 for the high jump minimum, and over 5,000 points for the hip.
Right.
If I can get higher in the high jump or more points, then amazing. That's I'll aim for
Right.
that.
But so for me, I would have that bar at 180 for you every day on run throughs and all that and pop-ups. And I'd be trying to get you farther away from the bar. That's one of my other things. I go, the knee drive up and across is big with me, and room. You need room to operate in a high jump. You know, if you're going to be running faster and you're stronger than you've ever been and all that, you know, I got taught late in my career that the higher the bar went, the farther out I should be, because your parabola changes. You know, you put more speed into the base, the parabola is going to get a little bit wider. And so the peak is here.
Yeah.
If you're too close, your high height's going to be behind the bar, and you're going to be in trouble because you have to ditch your knee drive early or whatever. So it's a long question, but I love it because technique work, you know, can be, like I said, I like it to operate at lower heights. I wonder if there's some kind of thing. See, we're actually over an hour. It's not giving me a time limit, which is good. Low work at those, higher work, yeah. And it depends on the time of the season. You know, you're getting towards the end, you know, maybe we do more of that, the high jumps, you know, but the way I look at it is a little bit different. My coach was a little guy named Baru Elias, who has left us now. But when I was in college, he was a coach at one of the local junior colleges, and he had 2 7-8 jumpers in his stable, and he had myself at 222. I don't remember if there's anybody higher in there that could very well have been, but he was good high, long, and triple. This little Romanian guy. You are the great athlete. I am a great athlete. And he's walking around in his little loafers with black socks and these little specs, and he's one of the few coaches I know that I know could never have been a great athlete. He was a great coach. And, you know, he had us always, we would do backovers, you know, jumping back over for layout. And then we would work our way back out every time. It never changed. Backovers, either 3 steps or 5. He didn't do a lot of 1 steps. I've kind of gone into what I call a 0 step now, where you can stand with your lead leg out in front of you and go, and then build backwards. So, you know, in a way, depending on the amount of speed that you have, you can still be jumping high heights, because, you know, I tell all my jumpers, I'm like, hey, you need to have a list. You need a notebook, 0, 1, 3, 5, and then full. All of those are basically events in their own.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're training all those. I go, we should have PRs in all those. And when you get to meet day, I would expect all of those to go up. But if you train them and you keep working on them with adrenaline, you know, those get higher. But it's like a standing 1 step, or a 0, what I call a 0, when your foot's actually already on the ground and you just go. I'm like, that's hard, you know. And so if you're jumping 5 feet or 5'2", or let's say 150, right, over something like that, I'm like, that's a maximal effort jump, and you're still working on technique. But the beauty of the shorter approach work is that you don't put the same amount of wear and tear. You still have to watch your volume, because you can still convince yourself that you're not really jumping that hard and take a lot of jumps. And then at the end of the day, if you took 25 jumps, even if they're just 0 step and 1 steps and 3 steps, that's still a lot of pounding, on that takeoff leg. So I like to work, like you said, it's a complicated question. And I understand the reason for the thought process.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll mention about that is, I think when you're operating at your higher levels, so let's say you're training at Mississippi State now and you're starting to take reps in practice at 177. If you're not making it, and that happens a lot, that can be it can hinder some people if they're always trying to jump a new PR in practice. I'm like, in my estimation, practices are made for higher heights and PRs. I think I jumped 7 foot once in practice. I was having a particularly good day, but I don't remember ever jumping that high in practice to where I was trying to push the envelope in practice. I would rather save that adrenaline and all that for a meet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
I
a
think,
question. Yeah.
yeah, I think for me, I mean, more recently, I think as I actually started to jump the higher heights. It used to be my personal best was 160. I used to be able to jump 160 in training. It was like great, like I'm jumping 160 in competition, I'm jumping 160 in training. This is great. And my coach told me, he was like, eventually you'll get to a stage where you're going to be able to jump like 174, but you're not going to be jumping 174 in training. And for me, for a while, that was like a mentality thing, because I didn't understand that I'm operating, like you say, in competition at this maximum level of adrenaline, this all going through me, and so I can jump these higher heights. And I just couldn't understand, like, why can't I jump 174 in training? Like, that was something that I just couldn't get my head around for a really long time. So I mean, I get it now, and my personal best, like you say, is 174. I think I've been very close to jumping 170 in training, but it doesn't get me down as much anymore. But it's just like you say, I've gone into training so many times now where I have knocked down the bar, and I personally like to push myself in training. Not every training session. We'll do the odd one where I do push myself more,
Right.
and it results usually in me knocking down the bar. But I like to see that, and I like to push myself. So when I get into competition, it's like, this isn't uncomfortable for me because I've attempted this height so many times, or this is just like being in training, except I feel 10 times better because I've got this adrenaline, So does that make sense,
Yeah. I understand it completely. And the idea that I have is that our brains are amazing, right? I go, your brain's this supercomputer that operates all of your systems at once. And when it switches into athlete mode, I'm like, that's space and time awareness, angles and vectors and all that stuff is in there. I think a lot of things are almost even pre-wired, like your body knows how to do them. Now, obviously, some people are more coordinated than others, so you might think I know how to do this, but I can't do it. But I'm like, for high jumping, which is an amazingly complex skill that involves all these things we're talking about, like driving your knee up and then leading it up and riding up. I like to leave it up there and ride it up to the top floor where the bar is, and then boom, hit the layout, right? So you go, that is a specific skill set and timing thing that I believe every single jump you've ever taken is in the supercomputer, and all of the results and all of the there's things in your body that kinesioreceptors, they call them proprioceptors in your body, that measure angles and speeds and vectors, and the way that it felt, the way that you saw it, the way that you heard it, the emotions of that day, all of that stuff is in there. It's just amazing. And then there's a simple amount of timing from when I left the ground to when I got to my peak height and when I threw my head back. And so there were heights, Rosie, that I tried. I remember I jumped at 220, I don't know, 25 times before I ever made it. I have no idea why, but and it wasn't, I don't remember being scared of it. I don't remember anything, but it was like 220 was a difficult flipping height for me. But 220 or 218, I think 218, right? There's 7.2, 7.2 and a quarter, 7.2 and a half. So 218, I made a bunch of times. 219, I made once, and it was my senior year at UCLA, and it was the day that I did a double PR. So I went 219, and then I made 222. 222 was my second attempt. I didn't have this great repertoire of how to jump at 222. I took one really good jump and almost made it, and then I made it. That was it. And I don't remember ever jumping at 222 again. So I was like, I jumped at 225, so I think all those things are in there. And then, sometimes it takes a while to learn the time. I'm just going to say the timing. It's going to take a while to learn the timing, right? And the time and the space, how far away I need to be, how long I need to ride that knee drive before I do that, right? How long do I hold that position before I pull? All of those things are in there. And so I think it's what I call jump memory. I need to write a book on it, but it's like your jump memory is going to just continue to grow as you continue to improve and you continue to take jumps at higher and higher heights, right? Because they'll be in there, and there's going to come a time where you'll be like, if I would have just done this a little bit longer, and we're talking about it in the high jump. Sometimes I tell my athletes, I go, a little bit longer could be 100th of a second.
Yeah.
Literally, if I could ride that knee drive for a 1/10 of a second is a long time in the high jump.
Yeah, definitely.
Things happen pretty quick, right? Well, listen, I know it's getting late there. I don't want to keep you longer. I would talk to you for another hour, but I know that's my computer's running out of power and the days are getting longer, and you've been very gracious with your time, but I want to extend the invitation again, Rosie, to get you back. You are just a ton of fun to talk to, and I'm a big fan of yours. I want to see everything. I want to know where you're jumping. If I can ever get away from California and get to an SEC track meet, it's going to be to see you in your first either both heptathlon, or are you going to do both the heptathlon and then compete every once in a while open in the high jump as well? Or is it all heptathlon?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's my goal. I'm obviously primarily going to be competing in the hep, but if I'm good enough to do the high jump for them, which I'm hoping I am, I'm hoping I'm just going to be the representative for that as well.
All right. Well, I look forward to hearing all about it. And I know, find out what the rules are from your coach and everything, but if I can post any of your videos or support you in any way, you let me know. All right.
Yes, for sure. Well, it's been great chatting. Thanks for having me. Hopefully I didn't mumble on too much. I have a record for doing that sometimes.
Well, I'm the chatty one. I think a couple times there, I'm like, did I breathe? Was that 5 minutes? Okay. So you get me going on a topic and I'll chew your ear off, but I appreciate your time, Rosie. And you've been very gracious. And like I said, I want to get you back on here anytime, find out, maybe we can do a life according to Rosie, or, how are things in the SEC, or, like what was that first weight workout like, something like that. So it's great to have you as a recurring guest if you can find the time between your training and your studies and a social life. All right. Well, thank you again, Rosie. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. That was Rosie Sharples. She is an 18-year-old freshman entering. She's at Mississippi State. She is a 1.74 meter high jumper. She's a heptathlete, and she's just getting ready to get over here to the US and start training. So we're going to be keeping our eye on her and have her back here maybe for another podcast here in a couple months and see how her season's going. But really great to hear the insights and the questions and the curiosity and the hunger to get better. And so that is it for the Raise the Bar podcast with Rosie Sharples from Mississippi State, from Scotland, all the way from Scotland right now. And we will be seeing you soon. Look to another episode coming up with my good friend Rodney Van Jr. We're going to do our special UCLA episode with a guest. Our guest, I'm going to announce right now, is Maurice Jones-Drew, former UCLA great running back, former NFL great running back, and now major celebrity on the NFL circuit. I know he works out here on the coast calling football games, does a lot of studio work, and really looking forward to getting him on here and talking. We might digress a little bit from our track and field roots. However, Maurice Jones-Drew since he was a fast running back, you may or may not know this, he made it to the state finals in the 100 meters and competed against Reggie Bush, if I remember my facts correctly. But if I don't, I'm sure he'll correct us. So we're looking forward to that. We'll see you soon again here on Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haynes from Sky High and Fly Jump Camp, signing off. Until next time.